All right, I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's live webinar entitled How to Maximize NuGenesis SDMS as Your Central Location for Analytical Data. Today's presentation will be by Marcelo Suarez, and I will introduce him in just a few moments. Marcelo, you can go to the next slide, please. And as we get into today's session, if you haven't had the benefit of sitting in on some of the great webinars and webcasts that the Asterix has been putting out over the last 2 years here, we welcome you and want to take a moment and introduce you to our company. For over 25 years, our unique breadth of highly specialized services, process, and technology has enabled Asterix to be a leading partner globally in transforming the ways that science-based businesses succeed. A couple of fast facts about the company. We were established in 1995. We operate as a vendor and platform agnostic services company. We operate in the U.S. and overseas with over 1,200 employees. 90% of the team members in our company hold advanced science degrees. We are a science-based organization, as well as technology experts. And we are headquartered in beautiful Red Bank, New Jersey. The type of companies we help are startups up through Fortune 1000, life science enterprises, chemical, CPG, government agencies, research institutions, all benefit from the services that Asterix brings, which on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about. So the spectrum of services. We like to say we support the continuum of scientific operations and data management. And this starts with really helping organizations understand, what is their technology roadmap going to look like, delivering transformative strategies with roadmaps that address business imperatives geared towards digital readiness, these digital transformation initiatives, which are kind of the hot topic of the day. Enterprise architecture, technology and data architecture that are platform-based and data-centric, leveraging an existing landscape while considering what emerging technologies you should be looking at. Data management and governance through business analysis, really understanding how you're going to handle the certain, FDA regulatory guidance, right? And then we get into a business analysis, how is this technology going to impact and drive your business? Right up through solution selection, we'll go out and help you pick the right solutions. You're sitting in on a solution webinar today. We have experts like Marcelo throughout the company that are experts in individual technologies who are going to help you choose the right solutions based on your individual needs. Then, of course, we could do development, implementation, and validation when that's over. And finally, if needed, we have a wonderful staffing team that can staff both scientific personnel into your labs and R&D departments, as well as technical to help run and optimize these systems. So that's a little bit about us as a company. I'd like to introduce our speaker on the next slide here. Marcelo Suarez is an Associate Delivery Manager at Asterix Technology. He works in the Informatics Professional Services Division, brings 16 years of experience in lab informatics and analytical instrumentation. Scope of work ranging from Empower and NuGenesis implementations that include training support, as well as third-party systems interface. Experience in projects of many different variations, systems best practices, systems architecture, configuration, data integrity, computer system validation, and many, many more. So Marcelo, I'll turn the rest of the presentation into your capable hands, and I'll pop back on in the end to MC the questions, hopefully, and wrap us up.
All right, thanks, Kevin. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining, and thanks for your time. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about how can we do more with NuGenesis SDMS as your central location for your scientific data. So here are the main topics that we're going to discuss today. So what is an SDMS to begin with? Some people on this call may not know exactly what an SDMS is or what it's supposed to do. So we're going to touch briefly on that. Some important considerations on when implementing NuGenesis SDMS, things that you have to consider when going with that specific tool. What are the benefits of having NuGenesis SDMS to begin with as a centralized scientific data repository? What are the data capture options that you have using NuGenesis SDMS, and how can you retrieve data that you just captured, and how can you reuse it, and how can you redistribute that data along? And last but not least, a short practical example of integration between NuGenesis SDMS and any other external applications. But to get things started, so to begin with, what is an SDMS? So look at this picture of this library. So think about this. If someone asked you to find a specific book within this library, what would you do? Option A, would you look for a search terminal? So where you would do the search and find the book location that you're looking for? Or B, would you walk from shelf to shelf, book to book, until you found the one that you're looking for? So that is a good analogy of what an SDMS is. If you go with option A, you have a good initial understanding of where SDMS would fit. If you go with option B, you probably need an SDMS right now. But basically, SDMS stands for Scientific Data Management System. It's a system in which you capture and you catalog your scientific data throughout multiple applications within one centralized location. That's what an SDMS do. So you can easily capture and search for your data and retrieve the data later on. So that's the main goal of an SDMS system. So what are the business drivers for a company to look for an SDMS system? So many customers try to extend their capabilities of their existing business systems, such as an ERP or a LIMS system, to automate lab processes. So driving business systems into the laboratory often leave a significant gap, which requires users to change the lab processes and to perform manual data transfers. So with multiple software required to address the needs of the lab, the solution is difficult to deploy and support a centralized solution to communicate all of those stuff. That also sometimes takes years to deploy, integrate, and validate, and sometimes they don't even deliver the expected return of investment. So here are some key questions that companies that are looking for a SDMS have. So can I do more with the data I already have? So labs produce tons of data. So sometimes by just linking the informations you already have can bring a lot of benefits in terms of collaboration and streamline workflow in your laboratory. So another question, can I automate data transfer from my instruments to other applications? This question alone has actually two concerns in mind. One, to improve lab productivity because you streamline and automate data transfer, but also it has a concern around data integrity by removing the human factor from the equation of transferring data and transcribing data over and over. Another question is, can I harmonize unstructured data and retrieve them as needed? Sometimes labs have multiple platforms, such as 2 or even 3 different CGS systems, for example. Some labs have Empower, Promillion, OpenLab, ChemStation. Can I bring all those data from similar systems but different vendors into one centralized location in a way that the data looks similar and streamlined for the entire platform of CDS systems? Last but not least, how can I quickly search for and retrieve data that is needed? One example of this, of course, is for audit purposes, and we do have a couple of discussions about this on the next slide. So when it comes to data integrity concerns, from this slide forward, we're going to discuss the benefits of having NuGenesis as your centralized location. I have 5 benefits to show to you guys here. There are obviously more than those, but I just wanted to focus on the 5 main ones. So benefit number 1 is of using NuGenesis as a centralized location for lab data is addressing data integrity concerns. So for everyone that read articles and documentation about data integrity, they are already familiar with the term ALCOA Plus, which is an acronym for all the things that are here in this screen. So ALCOA for attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. And the plus is for the other 4 items here. So if you look from an SDMS standpoint, attributable, once you send data to a specific system, you can capture the user who did that operation as part of that transfer. Legible, you're saving data on electronic format, so that is easily readable than a paper form that may have been gone through many years and lost legibility and so on. So you can stick with electronic formats, which are easier to read at some level. Contemporaneous. So as soon as you finish up your analysis, you can send that over to an SDMS system, so you can have a copy of that as contemporaneous as possible to your analysis. Original or truthful copy. This is one of the places where SDMS shines most. So instead of having to hold paper copies of your analysis over and over again from different data silos, you can have your data sent over and save them and catalog them and say that that is a truthful copy of whatever you have. So in terms of auditing, if you need to present that to an auditor, you can go straight to NuGenesis, do your search, and retrieve your data quickly and show that around. And accurate, as this is an exact electronic copy of this address is also the accurate part. And complete, you can send many different types of data to NuGenesis and catalog them, group them into specific projects or different projects, but you can search through multiple projects in NuGenesis. Consistent, as this is an electronic transfer of data, data will always be transferred equally, as this is electronic. Enduring, this is an electronic system, not paper-based, so you can have a lot of benefits in terms of data integrity by using an SDMS to your lab. And available, this is an electronic system available 24/7 for you to retrieve data as soon as you need it. So this is the benefit number one of having NuGenesis SDMS as your centralized location for your lab data. For benefit number two, now jumping a little bit more than just archiving data and cataloging it, but going a little bit further in terms of integration. So benefit number two is around consolidating data from different platforms for interfacing with LIMS or ERP. Not only those, you can have ELN, any additional external platform. So looking at this slide, for example, there are different ways you can integrate, let's say, your mass spec with your ERP. There are a couple of ways where you can go from the system to another system. So what would you think would be the easier way in this scenario shown above? Learn the APIs for each and every one of those manufacturers, learning the API from PerkinElmer, the API from Waters, the API from Agilent, and then interface the ERP with all those APIs individually, or send that information down to NuGenesis SDMS, parse data, harmonize them, and then present that already pre-filled and pre-organized in a certain way that makes your life easier to LIMS and ERP. So the second option would be a much lower learning curve to figure out how to deal with this with little to no programming skills required to alter data here. But you still would need to configure your LIMS system and your ERP to some level to grab the data that NuGenesis provided. But the level of effort and the technical challenge is way lower because you already dealt with the capturing and parsing of data within NuGenesis. So you only have one target to look at. So you only have to point your ERP to one place, not to 5 or 6. Benefit number 3. So having NuGenesis SDMS as your centralized location for lab data improves data accessibility and distribution across multiple sites and geographies. So once data is cataloged into SDMS, data can be shared across your organization, not only locally, but between sites and even globally, without the need of having access to the original instrument application per se. You can see the reports without having access to your bench level software. So to mention one more example of the benefit of improving data accessibility, you could think about electronic signatures. So electronic signatures can be applied directly into SDMS. So instead of you requiring your reviewer to sign electronically your data on each individual platform, you can ask them to go to SDMS, open up your data, and sign that directly within SDMS as part of your regular review workflow. You would maybe be required to have access to the individual applications if the reviewer can want to see the individual data on their original location. But in terms of electronic signatures, you can concentrate all of those within SDMS as being your last released data. Benefit number 4, better control over version data. So control over version over standalone systems can be an issue. Lots of labs have systems just like this, one instrument, one desktop PC, and that's it. No servers, no anything, everything resides on that one computer sitting on the bench level. So control over those standalone systems can be a burden, can be an issue. And sometimes backup strategies for those systems are neglected or ignored, which poses some risks of data loss or corruption. So SDMS can help with that by keeping all versions of the same file as it is changed during regular system operations. So let's say whenever a lab user runs an analysis, processes it, and generates a result, a data result that gets captured within NuGenesis SDMS. And then if that data is then replaced by a newer one or versioned, that version is also captured into NuGenesis SDMS. So you have the history of all that data on another location other than that PC sitting on the bench level. So that's improved control over versioned data, even for standalone systems. And all that you require is really provide network access to this computer, and then NuGenesis could reach here, scan, and find data and capture that for you. One important side note here for this slide is do not confuse archival of data with backup of data. So these are two completely different concepts for different final goals. So archival meaning capture of data for capture, retrieval, distribution, and for record retention and long-term storage purposes. So that's the goal of archival. For backups, the goal of backup is for disaster recovery and business continuity, generally used in a short-term storage. So you can use that in terms of disaster recovery. So to give you one more example, let's say you're under an audit from FDA, and the auditor asks you for a specific data from a specific date in the past. So it would be best if you grab your data from an archival location, which would be easily retrievable and searchable, so you can provide that quicker, instead of having to grab a backup and then do a full restore of the system to a virtual location so you can get rid of that one part of information. So some companies tend to misunderstand the concepts of archival backup. I just wanted to point this out. Last but not least, benefit number 5 is NuGenesis SDMS improves lab data workflow by reducing data transcription. So if you have to go to your original system and print your report on a paper format, and get the printed report, go to your LIMS system and type it over, you are losing time on that operation, and you're also imposing risks of human error while doing this operation. So by using SDMS as your middleware to transfer data from one application to another, that reduces data transcription, so improves workflow and reduces human error. So that automates data transfer, which was part of what I was telling before. So data will always be transferred in the exact same way over and over again. It harmonizes data coming from different platforms. So let's say you have multiple ICPs on your lab from different manufacturers. You can have that ICP data pouring into one centralized location within NuGenesis, one same project, standardize the way data is shown up, and then transfer that over to different platforms, to external applications, already sanitized and organized. And that will also shorten your cycle if you don't have to be passing data over and over again to different people and transcribing over. That shortens your review cycle, improving lab productivity. So what are the capture options that I have from NuGenesis? There are basically two. They are file capture and print capture options. So in NuGenesis, you can create different projects for those two specific types of captures. So for file capture, NuGenesis file capture is used for long-term data storage. So NuGenesis file capture, for example, has data adapters that can collect data from complex systems with advanced access to metadata. So for NuGenesis SDMS, there are a couple of data adapters created for specific manufacturers. So for example, a couple of them, Waters, of course, does have an adapter for Empower CDS data. So even though Empower CDS is an Oracle database-based application with lots of layers of configuration, that data adapter is able to reach within data and capture a couple of metadata from your original application. There are also adapters for Excalibur, for Agilent applications, Thermo, etc. There are generic file capture templates, so you can capture isolated files like TXT or CSV files or any Windows-based file. So there are a bunch of data adapters that can connect to different applications. Also, one thing about file capture templates, data can be captured and retained following corporate retention policies automatically. So whenever you ask NuGenesis to capture specific data, there are dates and times that you can configure to that capture so that data is maintained on your system as reproducible as possible to your company retention policies. So you can have, for example, data sitting on your original location and a copy on NuGenesis for, like, let's say 5 years. And then when the 6th year comes, that data that is older gets deleted from the original location and is only left a copy within NuGenesis. So that helps keeping your original system clean with a certain amount of data as the years go by. Another thing about this is you can also have legal holds for data. Let's say you have an investigation going for a specific data and you're running on trials or something like that. You can flag data with legal hold, so that's impossible to delete that record from NuGenesis at all. Last but not least, data can be restored either locally or directly to its original application PC. So whenever you find some data within NuGenesis, you can restore that either on your own computer, so you can see data directly, or you can ask NuGenesis to restore that directly where it came from. So you skip some steps and you go directly where that data was located, and you can provide that back to a reviewer or for restoration purposes. The other option that we have for captures is print capture templates. So print capture is used for long-term data readability, and it essentially acts as a virtual printer that acts like printing a record to a networked printer, like a virtual PDF or Microsoft PDF printer. There's a NuGenesis Unified printer, which is a virtual printer that grabs copies of your reports as you print them to NuGenesis SDMS. So those copies of records are permanently saved in the NuGenesis database, and they can be easily retrievable. And all the content of the reports can be made available for data reuse and distribution down the road. And we do have a couple of examples on the next slides, which I'm going to show with you guys right now. So in terms of data retrieval, so what you see on screen here is an image of the NuGenesis Vision website, which is the client interface of NuGenesis, to which you can come in, search for data, and retrieve them. So what you see on screen here is one print capture project, which we call demo project. And what you see for each and every one of those lines is a document that was printed using a virtual printer and sent down to the NuGenesis database on SDMS. And what you see here are a couple of metadata located in this project. So the metadata written in black are the metadata that are captured by default by NuGenesis to catalog data accordingly with a minimum of information, like the report size, number of pages, where it came from. So this was a basic Notepad document that we wrote manually for the purpose of this presentation. And the ones written in blue are things that we configured print capture templates to read data from that Notepad document, parse that out, and fill out here for catalog purposes. So we created a field called analyst name on that Notepad document and asked to read whatever was written on the right side of that analyst name anchor, and it found the analyst name here. Same for sample name and date of analysis. So whenever you have a readable data within a printed form, you can use that data to parse it over, catalog it, and on the next couple of slides, we're going to see how can we get this data and transfer it over somewhere else outside of NuGenesis and do more with the data you already have on your lab, right? So the goal here is to say an SDMS system doesn't necessarily need to be the graveyard of your data. You don't capture it and just leave it there. You can do more with that. So that's the objective. So to show one example of capture here, so what you see on screen is a concentrations report from an ICP system from Qtegra, a dummy execution here with data from an analysis. So, and if you look at the red square here, by conversations with a user, you can figure out that what needs to be reported is the concentration of all those metals and the average concentration of them. So we need to capture those numbers here, like for magnesium 0.134, for sodium 7, and so on and so on. So you do have your sample, your analysis, you can see the reporting here. So what is the path to get this to NuGenesis and to somewhere else? So first thing you do, you print a copy of this to NuGenesis using your virtual printer for NuGenesis. You capture one example copy of this file into NuGenesis SDMS. And then once you figure this out, you open up a copy of that report within NuGenesis Template Builder. So this is the tool that is used to look for data within a printed report. And you can use a couple of functions to make this happen. So for example, you see here on top, you can look for data within some place. You can look for data next to something. Let's say, for example, the analyst name that I showed a couple of slides before. I can look for something next to the sentence analyst name, 2 points, and then look to the right side of it and look for the name of the analyst. You can search for tables. You can look relative to something. You can match specific information. You can create a derived tag. Derived, sometimes we use this to put hard-coded values to the parsing of data. So if you look at this example here, this is the exact same report I was showing before. So for example, to capture magnesium results, I used the relative tool, and I made a search for magnesium relative to the marker concentration average, and also the marker magnesium, blah, blah, blah. So if you look here for concentration average, it's here, the magnesium here, and the cross out of these two end up right here where the number that I'm looking for is located. And by applying the search criteria, you can see that the system was able to extract that number from this location accordingly. You can also apply some more advanced functionalities. Let's say, for example, you can apply regular expressions to make this extraction good enough. For example, in this case here, you see 0.134 ppm. I made an application to remove any characters from here. So all you see here is the number, not the units, for example. So once you get this done, what you end up with is this. So this is a cutout of the NuGenesis Vision window again, but pointing out to the data that was extracted from that same report that you saw on the previous slide. So you can see here, an instrument name metals was a tag that I hard-coded to this. And for the magnesium, you can see here, I created a tag called magnesium, and on that tag, we imported the value from that one report that I showed you before. So whenever companies are concerned about data archival, this is generally where they stop. They got the reports, they printed it out, they read the metadata tags, transferred it over to SDMS, and this is cataloged and ready to be retrieved back if need be. But you can do more with your data with NuGenesis SDMS. So from this point forward, you can extract data for external applications. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. I'm going to show you guys one, which is more visual, but there are a couple of ways you can deal with this. Oops, sorry. So within SDMS, you have also a different kind of template, which is called extraction templates. So extraction template data is made available for reuse outside SDMS. And output is typically a file. We say typically because there's more to it. But basically, you can create extraction template, which is exactly the same tool as I showed you a couple of slides before, the NuGenesis Template Builder. Template Builder can be used both to create print capture templates and also extraction templates. So once you create an extraction template, you're going to instruct the system how to extract data to send it over. You can apply that extraction template to a data already sitting in NuGenesis SDMS. You can select the output of that file, and you can show is that file, clipboard, or screen. And once you apply, you get that data generated. For the purposes of this presentation, I asked for it to generate an XML file with the information from that ICP report I just showed you guys before. And to show one example, this is what you get. So this is an XML file created based on that ICP report. So you can see here the ICP folder, and you can see a couple of things that were asked to be transferred over to this XML file. So for example, one important thing that was transferred was the URL. So this URL here is the path to which you can find that information within SDMS. Let's say you have an external application like an ELN or a LIMS system, and you have the capability of capturing this URL tag here from this XML file to a field within your external application, which you can click on this link. If you can do this, once you click on this link, what it's going to happen, it's going to open up your browser. It's going to open the vision from SDMS. It's going to ask for your username and password. Once you type that in, you're going to be presented with this exact report as it sits down on SDMS. So it's going to show up the original report with the Q-tag symbol and everything else the way it was printed to you. So you can have easy access to that data within SDMS without even having to search for it. Once you click on the link, it's going to bring you straight to that one. A couple of other things, for example, metadata test number. So as part of the print, we asked for the user to type in the test number to which this test belongs to. So you can use this test number to parse and map that against your external application. We also capture things like the printed by, who did the print to SDMS, when that print was done. As part of this XML as well, we created a table, which we call results. And for each column of that table, I added one specific result. So for example, for the very first column of that table, we added a header of aluminum, and that column holds the value for the aluminum from that test. So if you see here, aluminum 0522, you can see aluminum 0522 from the previous slide. So you can see that whatever NuGenesis captured as part of the print capture is now being transferred over to an XML file that can be passed along to external applications. So just to summarize, so data that was sitting on original report within the lab on the bench level with concentration averages and so on, and the names of the testing, that data, once printed to NuGenesis, was captured, cataloged, and parsed. And this parsed data can be transferred over to an XML file. So you can use this, for example, for interfacing purposes with other applications, such as a LIMS or ERP, an ELN system, etc. You name it. Isolated XML files is not the only option to make this happen. And the way I showed you here was a manual process in which you open an extraction window and select the format and so on. You can also ask NuGenesis to do this automatically behind the curtains, dropping those XML files automatically as the new files drop in SDMS vision window. So you don't have the user having to ask for the extraction. That extraction happens alone on the background. And you can also ask for NuGenesis to transfer this data to an internal table within NuGenesis, which is known as Instrument Hub. So instead of looking for individual files, you can connect your application to the database from NuGenesis and query the Instrument Hub to get the same type of data, but not on a file sitting on a shared location, but directly from the Oracle database, right? So by doing this, you can do a lot more with your NuGenesis than just being a bucket of data that you just send your data for archival purposes and you do nothing more with this. You can do way more with the system, and you can improve your workflow, and you can improve your integration with other systems at the same time that you reduce the technical burden for doing this, because all of this was done using NuGenesis default functionalities. with little to no programming skills. The most difficult part from all this process really was figuring out regular expressions to make a parsing of the data to show this accordingly here. But other than that, all the other stuff was done using NuGenesis default functionalities. So with all that said, what are the things to consider when implementing an SDMS system? So a couple of things. First, map your lab needs first before locking into one platform of choice. I know I spoke how good NuGenesis is and how perfect as a platform that is, but there's more to it, right? You need to understand what your lab needs before you go with NuGenesis. Even though NuGenesis could do a lot of things, but you might end up with scenarios like, let's say, for example, do you already own Thermo's Sample Manager LIMP system? If you do, Sample Manager already has its own SDMS module, which is called Data Manager, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe that would be a better solution for you. Or let's say if you already have OpenLab CDS, you could, for example, use OpenLab ECM, which is a module on OpenLab platform that works on the same realm as NuGenesis SDMS. So figure out first what you need on your lab before you lock into that one platform of choice. Second point is verify what are the applications that require data capture. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned before, NuGenesis does have a couple of data adapters that can be used for specific platforms. Sometimes a very complex application that you have on your lab already has data adapters for NuGenesis to help you parse a lot of the tags from your original data from the lab. So you can leverage that on your benefit to make your life way, way easier. But you need to figure out that beforehand, right? Another topic is, what are the required integrations with third-party systems? Let's say, for example, SAP. So how do you need your data to be presented to SAP? Does an XML file suffice to you? Can you send that to a shared location? Or do you need access directly to the database? How do you envision doing this? So figure out what are the integration requirements, help you figure out the best path forward to choose a best platform and reduce the level of programming needs for your implementation. And last but not least, what changes will be required for the current lab workflow? So as you can tell, this is one report created on the lab level, right? There are many. And even for the same application, let's say for a CDS system, you can have one report for compound A and another report completely different for compound B, and so on. You can have several reports. So there may be some effort to standardize the way you report things on certain applications so you can get a hold of the data that you need. Let's say, for example, for your ELN application, your release application, you have to pass along a unique ID for your tests. So you can do it two ways, to name a couple of options. You can either enter that on your original application some way that it gets captured on the printed report, and you can capture that as part of print capture template, or during the process of printing that data, you can ask the user on a mandatory field to type in the number of that test method. But that involves changing a little bit the workflow of the lab. But ultimately, the goal is, even if you do have to do a couple of workflow changes, overall, you get a better performance of your lab with automated data transfer from one place to another and with less transcription errors and so on and so on. So these are a couple of things to consider when implementing an SDMS system. And that was all I wanted to share with you guys today on this presentation. And as a takeaway, basically the objective of this webinar was to show you guys that you can do more with your NuGenesis SDMS than only as a data repository to which you send your archival data and never think about this again. You can benefit from that, sure, as part of your data integrity efforts, as part of easy retrieval of data for audit purposes and so on, but you can do more with your system and lessen your burden of integration difficulties and technical challenges to transfer data from one place to another. You can send your data to NuGenesis SDMS, harmonize them in a way that you can use that upfront for other applications as well, reducing your learning curve to make this happen and making your life a little bit easier when passing that data along for other applications. Kevin, back to you.
Thank you, Marcelo. I was on mute there, trying to get it off. Great presentation. As always, much appreciated. We're going to go ahead and get the recording stopped.